3, we're going to talk about the reactions of photosynthesis. So how does this whole process occur as far as taking carbon dioxide and water and producing oxygen and glucose? And where in a plant does it occur? Well, if you recall, everything begins with sunlight. So without sunlight, the process of photosynthesis is not going to occur. Photoautotrophs absorb light energy. So they can either be plants, they can be plant-like protists. You've got the euglena down there on the bottom, or they can be what's called cyanobacteria or blue-green bacteria. So these are 3 examples of organisms that use photosynthesis. Now, where does this all happen? Well, it happens inside of a chloroplast. And in your coloring sheet, you started with the leaf, and then you went even more specific to where all these particular reactions are going to occur. So what exactly is a chloroplast made of? It is a double membrane organelle, and remember, it's only found in plant cells and plant-like protists. The outer membrane is very smooth, and the inner membrane forms stacks of connected sacs called thylakoids. Now, with all those stacks, that gives you a lot of surface area in order for chemical reactions to take place inside of that chloroplast. A thylakoid stack is called a granum, or grana for plural. And in between all of those stacks, we have a gel-like material called the stroma. So what is the function of the stroma? Remember, the stroma is the gel-like material around each of the grana. It is light independent, and one thing that you need to remember is independent means that you do not need light in order for the chemical reactions to take place. ATP is used to make carbohydrates like glucose. And you remember glucose is C6H12O6. And also in the stroma is where the Calvin cycle, and that is one of the steps to photosynthesis, takes place. Here's another picture of a chloroplast, or a different view of the chloroplast, and you can see where the stroma is, and then where all of the stacks of the thylakoids are located. The thylakoid membranes are where the light-dependent reactions occur. So once again, light-dependent would mean that they need light in order for the reactions to occur. Photosystems are made up of clusters of chlorophyll molecules. And if you recall from the last notes, chlorophyll is the pigment. And there was chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. The photosystems are embedded in the thylakoid membranes. And there are 2 photosystems, photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. So those 2 are not that difficult to remember. So in this particular picture, it gives you a nice overview of how photosynthesis occurs. And this is one chloroplast. And of course you see the light coming in to where the light-dependent reactions take place. And these, of course, are your thylakoid membranes. And then you have your independent over here, and the independent reactions take place in the stroma. So out of the light dependent, you're going to get oxygen, and out of the light independent, you're going to end up with sugar, or in other words, glucose. NADPH, which you do not need to know the scientific term for NADPH, is what carries the energy to help run this particular system. So NADP, and I think I just said NADPH because that's coming up soon, my mistake, is the reduced form. NADP picks up 2 high energy electrons and a hydrogen from the light reaction to form NADPH. NADPH carries energy to be passed on to another molecule. So once again, NADP picks up 2 high energy electrons and hydrogen from the light reaction to form NADPH. The light reaction, or the light-dependent reaction, occurs across the thylakoid membrane. You'll recall that when we talk about dependent, it means it has to have light. This particular reaction is going to produce oxygen from water. It's also going to convert ADP to ATP. And it's also going to convert NADP into the energy carrier NADPH. So a lot of things are going on in the thylakoid membranes. And you have to remember that these are microscopic. You cannot even see this particular structure without looking at it under a microscope. So let's look at the picture again of just the light-dependent reaction. And there we've got it. Once again, it's light-dependent. Light comes in, goes to that. The dog is really thirsty if you can hear her drinking it. Thylakoid membrane. Water also comes into this particular reaction, and we end up with oxygen, and then the byproducts are ATP and NADPH. So this particular hydrogen is going to be split and helps us with our NADPH. Photosystem 1 was discovered first. How unique in the fact that it is photosystem 1, and that was the first one to be discovered. It's active in the final stage of the light-dependent reaction. It's made of 300 molecules of chlorophyll and almost completely of chlorophyll A. And if you recall, chlorophyll, right here, is the pigment. And there are many other pigments that help particular reactions that use light to take place. Different colors of algae. There's red algae, brown algae, green algae. But unfortunately, we're not going to be learning about that this year. Photosystem 2, on the other hand, was discovered second. It is active in the beginning stage of the light-dependent reaction, and it contains about equal amounts of chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. There's also chlorophyll C. So, let's summarize the light reaction. The reactants are going to be water and light. The products, or the energy products, are going to be ATP and NADPH. Plus oxygen. Now we're going to talk about the light-independent reaction. Remember, the light-independent reaction does not directly use light. It uses the ATP and the NADPH from the light reaction. So the independent reaction uses ATP and NADPH from the light reaction in order to fuel that particular part of the cycle. Atmospheric carbon dioxide is used to make sugar like glucose and fructose. Fructose is, of course, your fruit sugar. 6 carbon sugars are made during the Calvin cycle. Those are your monosaccharides. So once again, your 6 carbon sugars are your monosaccharides. Glucose, fructose, and the other one is galactose. And this occurs in the stroma, that gel-like substance that's in between the thylakoids. And that's called the Calvin cycle. So the Calvin cycle is the light-independent part of photosynthesis. So, how does the Calvin cycle work? 2 turns of the Calvin cycle are required to make 1 glucose molecule. Once again, 2 turns of the Calvin cycle make 1 molecule of glucose. 3 carbon dioxide molecules enter the cycle to form several intermediate compounds that are called PGAs. A 3-carbon molecule called ribulose biphosphate is used to regenerate the Calvin cycle. If you haven't figured out by now, I'm just giving you the very brief version of how this whole cycle occurs. It is much more complex, but all you need to know or remember is in the light independent reaction, we get oxygen out of that, and we also get ATP and NADPH in order to fuel the Calvin cycle. In the Calvin cycle, our product is going to be glucose. Factors affecting the rate of photosynthesis, that means how fast photosynthesis will occur. Those are going to be the amount of available water, temperature, and of course, the amount of available light. So once again, the amount of available water, temperature, and the amount of available light energy. And this concludes everything that you want to know or need to know on photosynthesis.